My family robbed my college fund to fund my brother's lifestyle, then demanded my house to save him from loan sharks. So I let them think they won, until the CEO Gala. I fired him on stage. My family secretly conspired to legally steal my house to pay off my golden child brother's massive black market debts, completely convinced I was just a broke, failing consultant. They had absolutely no idea that I was the ruthless private equity ghost who had just aggressively acquired the exact corporation where he worked, and I was about to turn his highly anticipated promotion gala into a public, inescapable slaughterhouse. I am Marcus, 32 years old. I am a man who deeply appreciates the silence of a house that belongs entirely to him. I spent years living out of cheap motels and cramped apartments with leaky roofs, so every square inch of my current home was a testament to my survival. It was a beautiful 3-bedroom house in a highly sought-after, quiet suburban neighborhood. For my 32nd birthday, I had prepared a simple, elegant meal. I marinated a thick cut of steak, opened a very decent aged bottle of Cabernet I had been saving, and set the dining table for one. The soft amber glow of the pendant lights reflected off the polished mahogany table. Everything was perfect. When the doorbell rang at exactly 7 p.m., the sharp sound shattered the tranquility. I wasn't expecting company. I actually thought it was my lawyer, Elias, dropping off some final compliance paperwork for a massive corporate acquisition we had been working on tirelessly for the past 8 months. I walked to the front door, wiping my hands on a fresh kitchen towel. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the heavy oak door open. Instead of Elias, I found my mother, Evelyn, my father, Arthur, and my younger brother, Caleb. Caleb was 28 years old, but he walked into my house with the swagger of a man who believed he owned the entire zip code. He was twirling the keys to a brand new Audi R8 on his index finger, making absolutely sure the silver logo caught the hallway light perfectly. My mother marched in right behind him, carrying a thick, heavy manila envelope tucked tightly under her arm. My father brought up the rear, wiping his expensive leather shoes on my welcome mat with an exaggerated, dismissive scrape. There was no happy birthday. There was only a cold, calculating, predatory scan of my living room. Despite a lifetime of coldness, I still led them to the dining table. I poured 3 generous glasses of wine, placing them carefully on the marble coasters. I asked if they wanted food. I was entirely, foolishly wrong to play the dutiful son. My mother didn't even bother to sit down. She stood at the head of my dining table, took a sip of the wine, didn't compliment it, and tossed the heavy manila envelope directly onto the center of the table. The heavy thud echoed in the quiet room. She looked at me, her eyes devoid of any maternal warmth, and told me to open it. It was a military command. I pulled out a thick stack of legal documents. I deal with complex corporate contracts daily, so I recognized the formatting immediately. It was a quitclaim deed. It was a highly specific legal mechanism designed to transfer the complete title and ownership of my home directly into Caleb's name. It was drafted by an expensive local law firm, complete with notarization blocks and absolute forfeiture clauses. I looked up at her, waiting for the punchline. Her face was set in unforgiving stone. She crossed her arms and told me that Caleb was up for a massive, career-defining promotion at his firm, Apex Global. She said he was going to be a regional director. She explained, with a slow, condescending tone, that he needed to host executive dinners. He needed to project an image of undeniable wealth. My house, she pointed out, was in a prime location with the right open concept layout. I asked her, keeping my voice perfectly level, where exactly I was supposed to live once I handed over the keys to the house I had spent 5 grueling years paying off completely. My father scoffed loudly. He leaned heavily against my granite kitchen counter and told me I could easily rent a small 1-bedroom apartment downtown. He said I was single, had no dependents, and was running a dead-end, failing consulting business that barely kept the lights on. He framed this blatant theft as a noble family duty. Caleb finally spoke up. He gave me that signature arrogant smirk he had perfected since childhood. He took a sip of his wine and told me he would be generous. He would let me keep the furniture because it was cheap and didn't match his high-end aesthetic anyway. He walked over to the window, pointed at his gleaming Audi R8 in my driveway, and claimed that winners make hard sacrifices. I did not yell. I carefully folded the deed, aligning the edges perfectly, and slid it back into the envelope. I looked at my mother and told her I needed 3 days to review the paperwork with an attorney. My mother rolled her eyes dramatically, calling me unnecessarily difficult. She threatened to cut me off completely if I ruined her golden boy's future. They turned around in unison and walked out of my house. They did not say goodbye. I walked over to the window, gripping the wooden windowsill until my knuckles turned completely white. They wanted my blood. I decided right then that I would give them exactly the kind of ruthless business transaction they were asking for. To truly understand their sheer audacity, you have to understand exactly what they did to me 10 years ago. When I was 22, I was working 3 different jobs. I worked brutal night shifts at a logistics warehouse, tutored high school kids in math, and scrubbed flat-top grills at a greasy diner every weekend. I saved every penny, skipping meals and wearing the same stitched-up jeans. I put all my earnings into a high-yield college savings fund. Because I was 18 when I opened it, the credit union required a cosigner. My father insisted on being the joint account holder for tax purposes. I trusted him. Then came Thanksgiving. I came home exhausted, sick of guard, smelling like wet cardboard and cheap diner coffee. I walked into the kitchen to find my parents toasting Caleb, who was 18 at the time. They were celebrating his brand new tech startup, a useless social networking app for frat parties that never even made it to a prototype. I dropped my duffel bag and asked how they were funding it. My mother took a slow sip of her wine and told me they had used the joint savings account. My heart literally stopped. I ran upstairs, tripping over the steps, my hands shaking as I opened my cheap laptop. I logged into the portal. The account holding my blood, sweat, and absolute misery for 4 long years was completely drained. Over $48,000 gone. A zero balance. I confronted them, demanding my money back. My father told me family wealth was communal property, and Caleb was a visionary who needed capital, while my business degree was a waste of time. When I raised my voice in sheer panic, my mother pointed at the front door. She kicked me out into the freezing November sleet. I walked 3 miles to a roach-infested motel with nothing but a gym bag and a broken winter coat. That freezing night, the dutiful son officially died, and the ruthless businessman was born. I spent the next decade building an absolute empire from the mud up. I met Elias in a business ethics seminar. We started a private equity firm specializing in aggressively acquiring distressed assets. We operated entirely in the shadows. To my family, I was just a struggling consultant running a shell company out of a leaky office building. To the global financial world, I was a ghost, a very wealthy, completely untouchable ghost. Update 1. The morning after the birthday ambush, my Aunt Martha showed up. Growing up, she played the sweet, diplomatic peacemaker. I let her in and poured her hot chamomile tea. She sat delicately on my sofa, using her softest motherly voice, urging me to just sign the papers. She said giving up the house would finally earn me the unconditional family love I had always wanted. I excused myself to the kitchen to get more hot water, intentionally leaving my phone on the glass coffee table with the voice memo record function running. It's a habit I developed in ruthless negotiations. Trust no one, verify everything. When she left, I played the recording. Her sweet voice had dropped instantly into a venomous, greedy whisper on a call with my mother. Evelyn, I'm at his place now. He's weak. Keep the pressure on him. Once you get the deed signed, we can flip this prime real estate on the market, pay off my credit card debts, and you get the rest for Caleb. Just make sure the idiot signs it before he talks to a real lawyer. My own aunt was the architect of the robbery. My phone buzzed aggressively. It was Elias. Marcus. He said, his voice clipped and fast. Your mother went nuclear. She hired Valerie. Valerie was a vicious, unethical bulldog of a local attorney known for destroying families. Elias explained that they had just filed a preliminary injunction, falsely claiming they provided the original down payment for my house 10 years ago. They were trying to freeze my assets and force an immediate sale. They were trying to rob me twice. I opened the heavy biometric safe behind my bookshelf and pulled out a thick black binder. Inside was the finalized, board-approved contract for the hostile takeover of Apex Global. Elias, I said, my voice dead calm. Let them file the lawsuit. But I need a deep forensic background check on Caleb's personal finances. Find out how a mid-level manager affords an Audi R8. The next day, Caleb violently swung open the door of my decoy office. I operated out of a modest, slightly run-down brick building with cheap particle board desks. Caleb walked in wearing a bespoke Italian suit, accompanied by Harrison. Harrison was my senior financial analyst. Years ago, when I was homeless, Harrison was an older trader who mentored me. Out of respect, I gave him a highly paid job at my decoy company and paid for his wife's medical treatments. Caleb leaned heavily over my cheap desk, letting out a mocking laugh. Look at this pathetic place, Marcus. It smells like desperation. He clapped Harrison on the shoulder. Harrison flinched but forced a submissive smile. Harrison knows a sinking ship. I just offered him a senior advisory role at Apex Global. He's leaving you today because your business is a complete joke. I just stared at Harrison, my face a mask of absolute calm. Harrison couldn't meet my eyes, mumbling pathetically about needing a better salary and a 6-figure signing bonus. Caleb slammed his hand on my desk. Sign the house over today, Marcus. You have no leverage. Mom and Dad are bringing the lawyer tonight. Be a good loser. He walked out, and Harrison scurried after him like an obedient dog. My encrypted monitor chimed. It was an urgent email from Elias. The attached file was a masterpiece of catastrophic financial ruin. Caleb was a massive, desperate fraud. The Audi R8 was subprime leased and 60 days past due, facing repossession. His downtown apartment was 3 months behind on rent, facing active eviction. Worst of all, Caleb had taken out massive, unregulated cash loans from violent black market lenders to fund his lavish lifestyle. He was drowning in hundreds of thousands of dollars of illegal shadow debt. The promotion at Apex was real, but the salary wouldn't cover the hole. He needed a massive lump sum of cash immediately, or he was going to get his legs broken. That was the real reason they needed my house. That evening, 4 luxury cars pulled aggressively into my driveway. My parents, Caleb, Valerie the bulldog lawyer, and Sterling, the regional manager of the bank where I kept my decoy checking account, flooded into my living room, tracking wet mud onto my pristine hardwood floors. Valerie threw a stack of documents onto my glass coffee table. "We are bypassing the lawsuit," she barked. "Sterling here has locked your accounts. Your father is calling in an old joint line of credit. You will not be able to buy a cup of coffee tomorrow." Sterling puffed out his chest, lying smoothly about standard banking procedure. My father stood by the door, smiling with absolute sickening triumph. My mother stepped forward, her eyes blazing with toxic authority. "This is the end of the line. Sign the deed right now." I reached slowly into my suit pocket and pulled out a heavy silver fountain pen. My mother practically vibrated with greedy anticipation. I did not sign. I tapped the pen against the glass. "Fine," I said, keeping my voice dangerously calm. "You win, but I am not signing this in the dark. Tomorrow night is Caleb's big promotion party at Apex Global. I will bring the fully signed deed to the gala. I will hand it over publicly in front of the executives. In exchange, Valerie drops the lawsuit, and Sterling unfreezes my accounts." Valerie whispered frantically to my mother. My mother smiled a cold, victorious grin, thinking she had completely broken me. "Deal," she snapped. "Tomorrow night, 8 p.m. sharp. Try not to embarrass us." They marched out. I picked up my phone and dialed Elias. "Execute the Apex protocol. Fire up the legal presses. It's time to show them what a real executive looks like." Update 2. The next morning, I stood on the corner of the financial district, a few blocks from the towering glass skyscraper of Apex Global headquarters. I met with Vance, the CEO of Apex. He handed me a pristine stack of highly sensitive documents. As of 9:15 a.m., my private equity firm had officially absorbed Apex Global in a multi-million-dollar buyout. "I am officially retired as of today," Vance confirmed. "You are the sole controlling entity of Apex." He then handed me a thinner folder. "Your brother's file. My forensic accountants found massive, undeniable irregularities. He's been actively using company funds to cover the astronomical interest payments on his black market debts. It's corporate fraud on a federal scale." I stepped out of Vance's $2 million Rolls-Royce Phantom a block from my decoy office. Standing frozen outside a coffee shop was Chloe, Caleb's ruthless, superficial fiancée. She had always treated me like hired help. Now, she was staring in paralyzing shock as the broke consultant stepped out of a billionaire's vehicle. I gave her a hollow nod and walked inside. Let her mind spin. Inside my decoy office, my real team had transformed it into a corporate war room. My assistant, Elena, handed me a tablet. "The illegal asset freeze your father attempted has been legally obliterated. Sterling is under active federal investigation for bypassing security protocols. He will be fired and might face jail time." "And Harrison?" I asked Elias. "Harrison signed his onboarding documents with Apex this morning." Elias grinned. "He legally resigned from our firm, forfeited his stock options, and is now a standard at will Apex employee, which means he answers directly to you." "Perfect," I said. "Ensure my family is seated at the VIP table right at the front of the stage tonight." The grand ballroom of the Four Seasons was oppressively opulent, dripping with crystal chandeliers. I arrived at 7:45 p.m. in a dark, unbranded, bespoke Italian suit. I bypassed Chloe in the lobby, who looked like she was having a panic attack, and walked into the crowded ballroom. I spotted the VIP table directly in front of the stage. My mother was draped in an emerald silk dress and a massive pearl necklace she bought on maxed-out credit. My father wore a stiff, rented tuxedo. Caleb sat in the middle holding a crystal glass of expensive scotch, laughing loudly, acting like a king. Harrison sat at the edge, looking pale. I walked deliberately toward them. My mother sneered loudly. "Well, look who decided to show up. I thought you were going to hide in your pathetic little house." Caleb looked me up and down. "Did you rent that suit from a discount mall?" His sycophantic colleagues chuckled. Harrison did not laugh. His hands were trembling. I sat down, pulled out the thick manila envelope, and placed it squarely on the table next to Caleb's scotch glass. "The paperwork is right here," I said smoothly. Caleb's eyes lit up with blinding greed. He reached for it, but I planted my hand heavily over the envelope. "Not yet. I explicitly said I would hand it over publicly. I want to wait until the CEO, Vance, gives his farewell speech and announces your promotion." My mother leaned back, triumphant, thinking I just wanted an audience for my surrender. During dessert, Harrison abruptly excused himself to the restroom. I followed him. He was aggressively splashing cold water on his face. When he saw my reflection, he physically jumped. "I'm sorry about how things went down," Harrison stammered. "But Caleb has real power here. I couldn't stay on a sinking ship. Did you actually look at Caleb's personal financials before you jumped ship? I asked softly, crossing my arms. Just make sure you pay very close attention to Vance's speech tonight. I left him drowning in rising panic. The ballroom lights dimmed to black. A blinding white spotlight hit the stage. Vance stepped up to the acrylic podium. The room fell into electric silence. Caleb sat up perfectly straight, vibrating with excitement. Effective at midnight last night, I officially signed the legal paperwork to fully retire as CEO, Vance announced. A massive gasp swept the room. Apex Global has been fully acquired in a private, multi-million-dollar buyout. It is my absolute honor to introduce the new majority shareholder, the sole controlling entity, and the brand new CEO. Please welcome Mr. Marcus. The silence that followed was a suffocating vacuum. The massive spotlight swung rapidly and landed directly on our VIP table, illuminating me. I sat perfectly still and watched reality violently shatter my family's minds. My mother's victorious smile literally melted off her face, replaced by sheer, paralyzing horror. Her mouth hung open. My father dropped his heavy crystal Scotch glass. It shattered on the table, soaking his rented pants, but he didn't even flinch. Caleb's color drained so fast he looked like a medical emergency. He shook his head in rapid, jerky denial. No, he whispered, a high-pitched, desperate sound. He said the wrong name. I stood up slowly, buttoned my bespoke jacket, picked up the manila envelope, and walked away from the table. As I walked toward the stage, the senior board member stood up, leading a deafening standing ovation. I shook Vance's hand, stepped to the podium, and looked down at my family, who looked trapped in a horrifying nightmare. Before we discuss the future, my voice echoed with absolute clarity. We must publicly clean up the toxic rot of the past. I nodded to Warren, the feared director of HR, who walked onto the stage with a bright red folder. Upon forensic financial review, Warren stated clinically into the mic, we have uncovered a systematic pattern of severe corporate embezzlement. Over the last 14 months, Caleb has fraudulently billed this company for over $95,000 in fabricated invoices and personal expenses. Furthermore, these stolen funds were illegally funneled to pay off exorbitant interest rates on unregulated black market personal loans. The crowd gasped. Caleb grabbed the table trying to stand, but his legs failed him. He collapsed, sweating profusely. My mother put her hands over her face, shrinking down to hide from the hundreds of disgusted eyes. Caleb, I said, taking back the podium. You are officially terminated effective immediately for gross misconduct. Your accounts are frozen, and our legal department is handing these files to federal authorities. 2 massive security guards materialized beside Caleb's chair. I walked down the carpeted steps and stood directly in front of my brother, who was now weeping openly, tears ruining his suit. You told me winners make hard sacrifices, I whispered coldly. I took the quitclaim deed, ripped it slowly in half, then into quarters, and dropped the torn pieces directly into his spilled scotch. Enjoy the Audi while you still have it. Guards, escort this man and his guests off my property. The immediate aftermath was a masterclass in groveling. They begged to speak with me privately. I had security escort them to a soundproof glass conference room. When I walked in with Elias and Elena, my mother threw herself toward me, ugly crying. You can't do this, he's your baby brother. You have to save him from the loan sharks. My father looked deflated, begging me to sweep it under the rug. Caleb was hyperventilating, pulling frantically at his tie. They're going to break my legs. I'll do anything. I'll scrub the floors. Save you? I asked, my voice turning to ice. The way you saved me 10 years ago when you drained $48,000 of my blood and sweat and left me to freeze in a motel? That was a long time ago. My mother cried out. We are your parents. You owe us. I owe you absolutely nothing, I stated. I picked up a remote and pressed a button. The surround sound system blasted Aunt Martha's recorded voice. He's weak, keep the pressure on him. Once you get the deed, we can flip this real estate, pay off my credit card debts, and you get the rest for Caleb. My mother went bone white, staring at the ceiling speakers in paralyzing terror. You didn't want the house for dinner parties, I said, brutally exposing their rot. You maliciously conspired to strip me of my only asset to save this criminal and pay off her shopping habits. Suddenly, the door opened. Chloe marched in, grabbed her hand, and threw her massive fake diamond engagement ring directly at Caleb's chest. You're a complete fraud. She spat. Do not ever contact me again. She turned and walked out. Caleb collapsed to his knees, sobbing like a toddler. I turned to Elias. Ensure the termination papers are filed and give the audit to the police. If any of them step within 500 yards of me, have them arrested. I walked out without a backward glance. 6 months later, the universe violently corrected itself. Caleb didn't go to federal prison because Apex opted to avoid a PR scandal, but the loan sharks weren't forgiving. His Audi was aggressively repossessed in the night. He was forcefully evicted by armed sheriffs. My parents had to completely liquidate their retirement funds and sell their home at a massive loss to pay off his shadow debt, leaving them completely destitute. They now live in a cramped, moldy apartment. Caleb works the grueling graveyard shift at a logistics warehouse, loading the exact same heavy boxes I used to load. Aunt Martha was ruined. I leaked the audio recording to her high society circle. Her husband filed for a brutal divorce with an ironclad prenup, leaving her drowning in the credit card debt she tried to pay off with my blood. Harrison? I didn't fire him. I demoted him to a junior data entry position, placed his desk in a freezing, windowless cubicle next to the noisy basement servers, and permanently froze his salary. He spends 8 agonizing hours a day knowing he answers to the man he betrayed. Last week, Elena handed me a cheap, crumpled letter from my mother begging for rent money, claiming Caleb's back was hurting from warehouse labor. I didn't feel anger or sadness. I felt profoundly nothing. I fed the letter into my industrial paper shredder and went back to reviewing quarterly earnings. I started a heavily endowed foundation providing full-ride scholarships and housing to brilliant youth who have been financially abused by toxic families. Sometimes, the greatest act of self-love is building an impenetrable wall, putting toxic relatives on the outside, and walking away without ever looking back. Top comments. User 1. Ripping up the deed and dropping it into his spilled scotch is the most cinematic, ruthlessly cold thing I have ever read on this app. The fact that your parents literally stole $48,000 from you to fund his fake frat app, and then had the sheer audacity to demand your paid-off house to save him from loan sharks. They deserve every single ounce of that moldy apartment. User 2. The Aunt Martha recording reveal in the soundproof conference room gave me absolute chills. She really sat on your couch, drank your chamomile tea, played the sweet peacemaker, and then immediately plotted to leave you homeless to pay off her credit cards. Leaking that audio to her country club and husband was a masterstroke of justice. User 3. Demoting Harrison to the freezing basement next to the loud servers without adjusting his salary for inflation is such a specific, beautifully corporate form of torture. He sold out the guy who paid his wife's medical bills for a shiny signing bonus, and now he's trapped. Also, huge respect for starting that foundation. You broke the cycle and became the safety net you never had.